What is up, YouTube? That's here, and today I'm super excited to be bringing you guys another amazing tier list. Today we're going to be looking at the top 25 most competitive dragon-type Pokemon for VGC in Sword and Shield. If you guys remember last week, we took a look at the top 30 competitive fully evolved dark types that were in Sword and Shield, and I asked you guys what type of Pokemon you want to see me look at next. And everyone, actually, if you look at the comments on that video, there's going to be a link to it in the description. A lot of people voted for dragon types. So today we're taking a look at every single fully evolved Pokemon of the dragon typing that you can actually get in Sword and Shield. Obviously, you know, like Giratinas in Sword and Shield, Dialga Palkia, those things unfortunately are not legal for Sword and Shield, so they will not be on this list. And so I decided to take a look at the top 28. We're actually going to cut it to a top 25 and talk about every single thing that each one of these Pokemon brings to the table. I'm going to go a lot more in depth in today's video, talking about items, playstyles, past regional, national, world's top cuts throughout the history of VGC. So if you guys want to see more stuff like that and you guys have a suggestion for what type you want to see me look at next, leave a comment letting me know if you like this type of video and letting me know like what type you want to see next. I know Fairy was a very popular type last week when I covered Dark, but most people chose Dragon, so we're looking at Dragons today. And with further ado, let's get right into it. What I'm going to do first is, like I said, we're looking at the top 25. So that means 3 of these dragons aren't going to be making a cut. And the reason why I do my tiers like this is so you guys can be kind of guessing which one I'm going to look at next. And I feel it adds a little bit of a, you know, fun aspect to the video. So which 3 of these dragons do you think don't make the cut? I guess before we actually get into that, let's talk about dragon types, what they actually bring to the table. So dragon types historically are probably the historically most competitive type. You know, they have a ton of resistances and they only have a few weaknesses. They only really have weaknesses to other dragons, ice and fairy types. And before fairy types were introduced in Gen 6, like dragon types were pretty much uncheckable. They were really only checked by like teching Ice Beam onto like Cresselis and investing a ton of points in like special attack to actually take them out. And so dragon types, you know, every single team, you know, up until then had at least 1, sometimes 2 or maybe even 3 dragons. It was not uncommon for you to see double dragon cores, you know, go into a lot of regionals back in the day. So dragon types, you know, there was this fire, there was this water, there was this electric, there was this grass. They have so many amazing resistances. They bring a ton of bulk to the table. And historically, dragon types actually have some of the highest base stats in the game. You see a lot of these Pokemon are like all pseudo legendaries. You know, they got the Garchomps, Dragonites, Salamences, and you know, some of them are kind of legendary themselves. Like Regidrago's a new legendary dragon. You know, Naganadel kind of on there is there. You know, got Guzzlord, a bunch of things, tons of high base stats. But there are a few, you know, bad things about dragons. Obviously, the addition of fairy type really makes it so a lot of these dragons have an additional weakness to a very common type. And not only is it a weakness to that type, but, you know, fairy types are completely immune to dragons. So, you know, back in the day, you used to just slap Outrage on all these guys, throw a Choice Band or a Choice Scarf on them, and just, you know, go to town. You know, you can't really do that anymore, so it actually makes it a lot harder to use dragons in more recent years. I would say starting in 2017, you know, dragons started having a lot more harder time in VGC. The dragons' best days are definitely behind them, but it does not mean they're old and busted. And we're going to be taking a look at the list now and talking about the 3 Pokemon that I think don't really deserve to be in the top 25. And in no particular order, even though it is totally a particular order, I think Turtonator's probably the worst one. So we're going to take a look and put Turtonator down here. And we're going to take Druddigon. I guess I could have totally made this a top 28 video. But, like, you know, that does not ring as well as, like, a top 25 video. It doesn't ring quite as nice as a top 25. And then, unfortunately, I'm actually going to have to put Drampa at 26. Now, these 3 dragons, one of the reasons why they're so low is because they don't really play the way the rest of the dragons should. You know, let's look at Turtonator first. Turtonator obviously going to be a fire dragon, same typing as Reshiram, and so it doesn't really have that big resistance to water that, you know, most dragons have. It's adding a weakness to rock and ground, which, you know, you can see a Pokemon in my team like a Heatran. You're much better off kind of just running a Heatran at that point. It does get shell armor, which means it has an okay ability, but it can't really rely on it. And it has the ability, it has the move Magma Trap, which is it kind of like barricades itself, and then like I think if you hit the guy, if you hit the Turtonator, it deals like tons of damage back. I don't know if it's called Magma Trap, but anyways, that's Turtonator. You don't really see a lot of Turtonator. It's more of a meme pick. I've seen a couple of people do like Bulldoze weakness policy Turtonators. That's not to say it can't be used, but historically, like I would say weakness policy in Sword and Shield is probably its best item. Other items I've seen people use on Turtonator are probably Life Orb and Choice Specs, and that was a little bit in 2018. But again, I don't think Turtonator has any realistic results. If you guys want to start using some Turtonator and changing the mind of the meta for this Pokemon, be my guest. I think it's a cool looking Pokemon. It's historically a lot better in the trading card game. But up next is going to be, what's this guy's name? Hydragon. Another Pokemon that, like, unfortunately, it doesn't really perform up to the standards of some of the other dragons. So let's actually compare it to some of the other dragons. Like, you know, if you're going to compare Hydragon to, like, you know, Dragonite, you know, even Haxorus is probably the biggest, closest comparison. The biggest thing that they have in common is that they're both mono dragon types, which means they don't have that 4 times weakness to ice that a lot of the other dragon types have. And this guy actually does have some pretty good abilities. This one's gonna be cracking Mold Breaker. It gets Rough Skin, and I don't actually remember what the other ability is. Maybe it's Scrappy or something like that, but it's actually just not really fast enough to be able to be used in VGC. I know for singles, it got access to Scale Shot recently, and that makes it actually like a lot easier to like get a couple speed boosts and then maybe potentially carry. It has an abnormally high defense stat compared to some of its other stats. It has a great attack stat as well, but it's a little bit too fast to work in TR, and it's a little bit too slow to work in Tailwind. Again, similar to Turtonator, it's a little bit of a meme pick where it's like cool when you see it used, but I don't think there's any realistic results that anyone's gotten with this Pokemon over like my 10-year history playing VGC. And, you know, maybe these are things that we have to start using. I think this one would look really cool in the Dynamax option. Now, the next Pokemon, the 26th best dragon, is going to be Drampa. And I actually think Drampa is a little bit better than even some of these Pokemon. But there is there's one thing holding Drampa back. And I just think that the fact that we're comparing it as a dragon type, you know, this is a top 25 best dragons list. If this were a top 25 normal list, you know, maybe Drampa will get in because, again, it's a normal dragon, which adds the fighting type weakness, but it also adds a ghost nullification, which is actually really, really important on a lot of teams. Drampa can get access to Cloud 9, which is one of the best abilities in the game. It says whenever Drampa switches in or goes onto the board, it fully negates every single weather. So if you're having a problem with like sun, sand, rain, you can use Drampa as like an anti-weather, and it's really, really good. And that is one of the better abilities in the game. It even makes Pokemon like, you know, Golduck, and, you know, later in the list we're going to see a look at Altaria. It makes Pokemon like those actually able to be used. Drampa also gets access to Berserk and Sap Sipper, which are great abilities. But again, it's just its base stats. I think it has a 470 total base stat, so it doesn't really fully carry over and live up to that dragon hype. But again, if this was ranking normal types, it would definitely make a top normal list. I think having access to like Flamethrower, it gets access to a Stab Hyper Voice. It's a great mon in Trick Room, but we're gonna see there are better options in Trick Room. Like we're hovering on a Dragalge right now, a great option in Trick Room. Drampa definitely could be used. It had decent results back in 2017, and I actually want to say there was a couple people that got decent regional placings back in I want to say 2014 and 2015. Drampa, like anytime you see a Drampa on a team, you're like, yo, that's Drampa, that's cool. This Pokemon, you have to respect it because it can carry. But again, it's not one of those dragons, like if we're comparing it to the other dragons, if we're comparing it to Dragalge, if we're comparing it to like even like Appleton or even Altaria, those are Pokemon that have like fully evolved forms. Drampa is just a base dragon. I think it's one thing that all 3 of these dragons, you know, have in common that aren't really making the list is that they don't have any evolutions, right? They're just base dragons. So their base stat totals are just a lot lower than a bunch of the other Pokemon they're competing against. I do think Drampa's amazing, as an amazing shiny, 3 really good abilities. But, like, if we're comparing it to Cloud9 users, we have Altaria. If we have Sap Sipper users, we have Goodra. And if we have Berserk, I'd rather just use a Galarian Moltres. But overall, it is still a really cool Pokemon. Common items for this guy. Looking back, I've seen a lot of Specs Drampa back in the day. I've seen a lot of Citrus to get those Berserk procs. And then I've also seen decent amount of Life Orb. Life Orb's been a pretty common item on this guy. Slap the Life Orb on it, get you closer. Well, yeah, get you closer on those Berserk sets. Historically, this guy actually used a lot of Berserk back in the day. But, you know, that Stab Hyper Voice, you definitely can't sleep on it. But that was in metas where, like, you know, AoE was a lot more rewarded. Now that Dynamax is a thing, like, it's cool. You go for your like, Life Orb, Stabbed Hyper Voice, and then they just Dynamax and don't really care. So, all 3 of these Pokemon, definitely victims of, like, metas not really favoring their playstyle, but still really cool choices nonetheless. So now we're actually here. Here we are. We can finally take a look at the top 25. And I have a question for you guys. I know you guys probably, a lot of you guys have already left comments saying, like, you know, what type you want to see me use next. And I thank you guys so much for leaving those comments. But if you have the time to leave a second comment, I want to know. I'm always asking you guys. Leave me a comment letting me know if you have made it this far. Leave a comment saying, I made it this far. Just like the last one, because I want to see the retention numbers. It would really help me out, and I want to know, have you guys actually liked the way we're actually looking a little bit more in depth, talking about regional placings, common items, going over all the abilities? If you want me to go even more in depth in future videos where I talk about EV spreads and different moveset choices on these Pokemon, I definitely can. So let me know what you think, and we're going to take a look at the top 25. Now, the 25th pick may surprise you if you're not an avid viewer of this channel. But if you guys are an avid viewer of this channel, you know the Pokemon that I'm ranking as the worst dragon type in history, the Pokemon that I have a personal vendetta against, is actually gonna be, it's gonna be Flygon, man. Look at this thing's name. Its name is already Flygon Sucks. So Flygon, I think, is the 25th worst dragon. I guess like 25th best. It's the 25th best. It's the first worst dragon, but it's the 25th best. And I think there's a lot of reasons why. And the number one reason why is, let's actually just take a look at the rest of the Pokemon on this list. Again, if we were comparing ground types, it'd be a different story, but we're comparing the best dragons. So let's compare Garchomp to the number one Pokemon. Sorry, let's compare it to Garchomp. Let's compare Flygon to the number one Pokemon that it would be competing against. If we're comparing it with a Garchomp, right? Garchomp has amazing base stats. It has the same ground dragon typing. It gets almost as much special attack, much more base attack, much more speed, and overall just gets everything Flygon wishes it had. I know Flygon in Gen 7, I think they gave it Dragon Dance. But, like, Flygon is just a bad version of, like, all the other dragons kind of mixed together, right? Like, everyone's like, yeah, but Flygon has Levitate. It's like, okay, if you want a dragon that doesn't take ground damage, why don't you use a Salamence then and have more special attack, more attack, same base speed, but better offensive coverage, better defensive coverage, and this thing had Dragon Dance the whole time, you know? You could also run a Dragonite and get multi-scale. Are you starting to see a pattern? You could run Noivern, have even more speed, have access to Frisk and Tailwind. Like, when it comes down to it, when it actually comes down to it, Flygon is like the red mage of dragon types. Does that make sense? It does just enough of everything. Like, you can see the Flygon set that I'm currently running here. It's a special Flygon set. Flygon historically has been used as mostly a Choice Scarf Mon. The person who's got the biggest results with Flygon is probably Gary Kwan. I think he's took it to Worlds twice. It's one of his favorite Pokemon. He's gotten at least one regional top cut with it. Flygon's a Pokemon that pops up every once in a while because it gets access to, like, U-Turn if you want to go mixed. It's a great Scarf Revenge KO Mon. And a lot of people definitely sleep on the Flygon. In metas where, like, Garchomp's really, really popular, you see a ton of people packing Intimidates, and people don't really run special Garchomp. You can run special Specs or Scarf Flygon with, like, Draco Meteor. In previous formats, it was one of the better Earth Power users. I will give it that. It's one of the few Pokemon that has a decent special attack stat. I think it's, like, base 85, and it does get that stabbed Earth Power, so that's actually decent damage. It gets access to Flamethrower. We have Giga Drain on the set as well, so it gets decent coverage. But again, like, Flygon versus Naganadel, I'd rather have a Naganadel. Flygon versus Garchomp versus Salamence versus, Latios, Noivern. Almost all of these Pokemon do what Flygon's trying to do a lot better. And yeah, Flygon probably could have been, like, ranked 20th, but, you know, it's a bit of a meme on this channel to put Flygon, to always, like, assume the worst in Flygon. And while I think Flygon's design is absolutely amazing, like, you're not going to hear me talking bad about its design. I think Flygon looks great. I just think competitively, it kind of just falls off, at least in the doubles format. In singles, I think there is a lot going for Flygon because of that U-turn pivot potential. But in doubles, it really just, it really does fall short. There was one other thing I did want to talk about in regards to Flygon. Maybe I'll remember it as the list goes on. But again, Flygon being another Pokemon that's also, because it's so weak compared to a lot of the other dragons in its offensive and even speed capabilities, like, if anything Dynamaxes, it's kind of just, like, the saddest thing in the world. Like, you can go for these super effective stabbed moves and just not KO anything. Yeah, I remember what I was going to say. So the reason why I don't really like Flygon, I guess I'll tell a little bit of a story for those guys that haven't heard it. I was playing in a Gen 4, I was playing, like, a Gen 4 singles tournament. I was playing in the finals of a tournament. And this was, like, almost 10 years ago now. And it came down to my Metagross versus this guy's Flygon. We're both at full. we're both just chilling, right? And he's like, you almost had me, man. GG. And I was like, yeah, GG. He goes for an earthquake, thinking he's hot stuff with his stabbed earthquake with his Flygon. It does like 60%. And then I just one-shot his Flygon with a Zen headbutt. Like a stabbed, not super effective, like 80 base power move. And I just one-shotted it. It was a full. And maybe it took like Stealth Rock's damage, resisted Stealth Rock's damage. And I was like, Flygon's terrible, man. Like, any Pokemon that can't like Oko stuff with like super effective stab moves and then gets one-shotted by neutral stab moves that aren't super effective, like, what does it have going for it? What does it really have going for it? Let me know in the comments if you're a Flygon stan. Similar to the last week where I said, like, there's tons of, like, Crawdont stans, like, everywhere. People that just, like, needlessly, for no reason, just, like, will always support Crawdont. There's the same number of people that will always support Flygon. So I figured I might as well get Flygon out of the way so we can have a good rest of our list. So moving on to the next Pokemon on our list. What do you guys think it's going to be? There's a lot of good Pokemon on this list. Like I talked about, dragons have a lot of high base stat totals. And the next one may surprise you. It's actually going to be our boy Tyrantrum. I love this Pokemon. I think aesthetically, Tyrantrum looks amazing. It is like a crazy cool T-Rex. It looks blue, shiny, and it has some great abilities. This guy has Rock Head. I think it also has Strong Jaw, which are both really, really good. So Strong Jaw, this guy gets all the Elemental Fangs, so those get boosted as well. So it's pretty much like stabbing those moves if you want to use them for that offensive coverage. I prefer going with the Choice Scarf Rock Head set and going for those massive stabbed 150 base power head smashes. I think it might be the only like Rock Dragon, and that's actually pretty unique typing. It adds for like a ton of weaknesses, but it adds for really, really good like offensive coverage because this is a guy that can put pressure on a lot of the other dragons because a lot of the other dragons do share that like flying type, and so it's good against like Salamences, good against Dragonites, good against Alterias, and what have you. So that's a really cool type combination. And it also gets Horndrill. I think Horndrill is kind of cool to see. I don't know if it kept it in Sword and Shield, but like this guy has Horndrill. I think this is an older Tyrantrum, but Tyrantrum is actually really, really cool. The reason why Tyrantrum falls a little bit short is that its actual speed stat is not that great. So even if you're going like full attack speed Jolly, you're still kind of getting outsped by like Naganadels and, you know, other Pokemon that hang around that 120 base speed number. So Tyrantrum, I don't think actually has gotten any significant regionals placings. The Pokemon I would compare it most to is probably like a Rampardos, which again, another Pokemon that's also really hard to use, doesn't really bring a lot to the table. It's always a fan favorite, and I definitely think that Tyrantrum, we use this Pokemon a decent amount. We've used our fair share of this Pokemon, and it's always fun. You know, a Head Smash can act as an elite button. Choice Band, Choice Scarf sets are great, but if you guys have your own personal Tyrantrum sets, maybe let me know in the comments below. I'd love to take another crack at this guy because he's definitely a fun one to use. So Tyrantrum's right there. So we've talked a little bit about the next Pokemon on this list. What do you think it's going to be? It's not Regidrago, I promise. It's not. The next one on the list is going to be Altaria. And I feel that, you know, Altaria is one of those Pokemon, similar to a lot of these dragons and a lot of Pokemon on previous tier lists, that losing Mega Evolution, like, really did hurt them. Altaria was definitely one of those ones that was reliant on a Mega Evolution. It gets Cloud9, similar to Drampa. But, actually, how do you guys pronounce Drampa? Do you guys pronounce it Drampa, like a grandpa, or Drampa? Like Tampa, Florida. Let me know. I want to know how many people pronounce Drampa like that. Because I call it Grandpa, because like a grandpa. Like, look at this guy. He looks like a grandpa. That's what a grandpa would look like if it looked like a Pokemon. But anyways, yeah, back to Altaria. It gets Cloud9, which I think is the better ability on it. And in previous gens, it used to get a Mega Evolution, which made it Mega Altaria. It still had Dragon Flying typing. And it gained Pixelate, which means if it used Hyper Voice, it would stab the Hyper Voice and get like a 1.2 boost on top of it. And, you know, that in combination with like Flamethrower made it a Dragon type. Actually, became a Dragon Fairy type, actually. It wasn't a Dragon Flying typing. So it actually became, it lost the Flying for Fairy, and it was able to go for like really, really cool. Like, it was a dragon that really checked other dragons, but also still checked Ferrothorn because it acts like Flamethrower, has access to Tailwind. You can see our Altaria set here is a Physical Sweeper that uses Perish Song. It's the only dragon, I believe, that does get Perish Song. So it does have that going for it. So you can already see the building blocks here to where like Altaria would be better than Drampa as a Cloud9 user. I do think that there's still like a lot that this Pokemon can do. It gets like Cotton Guard. I don't know if it still gets Tailwind in this in Sword and Shield, but I think it's a great mon that definitely is underrated. There's so many cool things it can do. I think it's a really cool weakness policy mon. That was the item that I chose to use on this guy. And I'm thinking of like regionals placings. And I really don't think this Pokemon actually like, succeeded past like the, you know, Premier Challenge, maybe mid-season showdown level. Again, it's a little bit more of a meme pick, and when you're already trying to fit a dragon into your team, you're already really hard pressed when you can choose against like Altaria or Salamence, or Altaria and Dragonite, for example. Those are two of its like bigger competitors, and a lot of people would always kind of choose to go with that Salamence, you can that Intimidate, and it means Altaria is a lot harder to use. But it does have like decent matchups against like, you know, when Sun's really popular. I think in 2017 when there was a lot of Lilycole, you saw a decent amount of Altaria because you also saw it pop up with its Mega Evolution potential. So Altaria, cool Pokemon, but unfortunately not really, you know, that top 10, top tier material. But you know what? I'm happy that I put it over the things that I put it over because I still think it's better than Flygon. Altaria is the better Gen 3 Dragon in my opinion. Up next though. What do you guys think is next? You know, we've used a lot of these Pokemon on this channel, and the next one may surprise you. It's gonna be Falafel. I think Falaffel's a great dragon, actually. I think Falafel brings a ton to the table. This set is terrible. Let's find another Falafel so we can look at one that also is the same Falafel. I mean, it's not the same, but like it's just raw. We're gonna look for a Falafel right now so I can show you guys what a real Falafel looks like. What do we got? Is it you? Yes, that's the Falafel. That's my boy. Perfect. We gotta go out through the menus. It's important to show you guys the most competitive best sets that I possibly can. And to do that, you know, I had to get all these Pokemon in game. Yeah, this is the hard part. Making these videos, the reason they take like once a week to come out is because I have to get all these Pokemon in game. It's hard. Anyways, yeah, Falafel. It gets Hustle. I think this is the first G-Maxable Sword and Shield Dragon on the list. So this thing gets a G-Max. Its G-Max ability, I believe it goes off of the Dragon Attack as well. I think, is it off its Dragon Attack? No, it's off its Grass Attack. It's off its Grass Attack, and it lowers the Evasion, I believe. Or it sets, no, it doesn't set Gravity. I think it just lowers Evasion. I think it lowers Evasion, but one really cool thing about Falafel is it does get Hustle. Hustle is a really, really good ability that not many Pokemon get, and all the Pokemon that seem to get Hustle, you know, like Durant, for example, end up being really good. Even Dracozolt gets it. So Hustle boosts your accuracy by 1.5, but it lowers your accuracy by, I think, 20%. So in that G-Max mode, remember, you can't miss. And remember, your G-Max attack makes it so it gets easier to hit things. You also have a really, really cool attack that only this Pokemon gets called Grab Apple. The user inflicts damage by dropping an apple from high above. This also lowers the target's defense stat. So it's similar to like Seed Flare. That's the best way that I can actually compare it, is like Seed Flare from Shaman. I really, really like this attack. Has a ton of PP. This thing also gets access to like Dual Wing Beat if you want to go for Airstreams. It even gets Sucker Punch as an egg move while still having like Dragon Dance, Outrage. I think this thing actually has a ton of potential. It's a little bit frail. I think the only real results this thing actually showed, since, you know, the regionals were capped for Sword and Shield, was I think Moxie Boosted's Players Cup 2 team was built around Falafel. Either Players Cup 2 or Players Cup 1. I would say Moxie Boosted's the guy, the YouTuber, that has the best Falafel results. Feel free to, you know, leave a comment below and dispute that. But Falafel's cool. We've used a ton of Falafel. I think Falafel's a little bit better in singles personally. But anytime you can G-Max them on and go for those big hustle boosting moves and know that you can't miss, that's great. Falafel also being a grass dragon, I think is really, really cool. It's one of my favorite typings in the game. Again, it's similar to other dragons having that 4 times weakness to ice, but I feel that, like, you know, you're forcing electric attacks. You're adding additional weaknesses to like poison and flying, but those can definitely be improved by, you know, adding like a Heatran, for example. Heatran could mitigate the poison, resist the flying, get a free switch into a Heatran that can pin that Pokemon. And so sometimes you can use those weaknesses as a strength to bait your opponents. I think Falafel's a great mon, but again, like, it kind of does fall short when compared to other dragons. It still has the fairy weakness. It still has the 4 times ice weakness. And in most situations, you're just better off using some of the other dragons on this list. Its base stat total, even with the hustle, does fall a little bit short, but I think Falafel is awesome. So moving on to the next on this list. This is a Pokemon that we've already featured on this channel in a top list. And it's going to be Guzzlord, man. Guzzlord is such a cool Pokemon. but I just don't really think that, Guzzlord can really cut it in terms of the full upper echelons of competitive play. I almost want to say that I think I might have some of the better Guzzlord results. I probably have about 40 CP with Guzzlord. I top cut 2 events in 2019 with it, 2 like mid-seasons, or a mid-season and a premiere. I think Dr. Fidget also top cut a regional back in 2017, if I'm wrong, using a full Ultra Beast team. Used 6 Ultra Beasts, and one of them I believe was Guzzlord. Guzzlord pops up every once in a while. It has amazing HP stat. It has a massive HP stat, but its defenses are very subpar. It has a 4 times weakness to Fairy because it's a Dark Dragon. But, if you put points in those defensive stats and forgo the HP stats, similar to how we did, I think this Guzzlord's made correctly. There's a really weird looking EV spread on this guy. You don't put points in any of the other stats. This is one of the few Pokemon that's HP stat is already so massive, you'd be getting diminishing returns putting points in HP, so it's better to actually just max out your defenses. Historically, this guy's run as like an Assault Vest set. It gets a Stab knockoff. I think we've seen a couple people use Weakness Policy now that Sword and Shield's out. I personally like to go with like a Wiki Berry set. This is one of the few Pokemon that I like a little bit of sustain with, and even though it does have that like 4 times resist, 4 times weakness to Fairy, I think that's actually a good thing. Even in a meta dominated by Tapus, like if you have a Guzzlord in your team, right, and they have like a Tapu Koko, or a Tapu Fini, or a Tapu Lele, or even any Fairy type, maybe like a Togekiss or something like that, you know for a fact that if you have a Guzzlord, they will be bringing that Pokemon to beat your Guzzlord. So you can do one of 2 things. You can bring your Guzzlord and not let them KO you. Like, obviously, you can see this set personalized Dazzling Gleam. The number one ways to get rid of the number one fairy attacks in previous gens back in 2019, 2018 were things like Dazzling Gleam and Hyper Voices that were boosted by Pixelate. So Wide made it so you would never take damage from that. So you can bring the Guzzlord and try and bait them and either protect or switch, or, just save it in the back until their fairies are gone. Or you can just not bring the Guzzlord, know that they're bringing your fairies, and bring your things that check their fairies. And that's a win-win. So but I would say Guzzlord's biggest strength is in the team preview. And you're hearing me talk it up a lot, but the reasons why it's not that great, it's still so low, is because even if you do happen to get Beast Boost with this thing, you're not really boosting anything significant. I think we boost our special attack with this guy, and he's a little bit slow, he's a little bit of a wall, and he plays very reactive, which I feel is not the best way to play a Pokemon in the current meta for Sword and Shield. It's a victim of the Dynamax being so good. If I'm trying to react to something that doesn't have good recovery moves, doesn't have a lot of protection, yeah, it has cool defensive typing, but like if I get put behind, this Pokemon will not like bring me back in a game. If I get put behind, I kind of just continue to lose slowly if I lose Guzzlord, or if I use Guzzlord, and that's the reason why it falls a little bit short, but it is such a cool Pokemon to see, and it is definitely one of my favorites. Speaking of another Pokemon that is one of my favorites that people usually forget is a dragon type. It's going to be Alolan Exeggutor. I actually really, really, really like Alolan Exeggutor. There's a couple reasons why. Alolan Exeggutor is so good. You can see, first of all, this thing has actually a lot of really good abilities. It's another grass dragon, similar to Falafel, but this thing gets Frisk, which is, I think, one of the best abilities in the game. Like, you can just lead Frisk, and any sort of meme, best of one shenanigans, eject button, tricks, self-policy procs, like anything. Like, both your opponent's items right from the game, and so they have to play you straight up if you have Frisk. That's great. It also gets access to Harvest, which means if you want to rock like a Citrus Berry on this guy, he has like potential for unlimited recovery with Protect. Harvest says if you've used your berry, you have like I think like a 50% or 25% chance or something to get your berry back at the end of every single turn. And so every time you use your berry, you just Protect for a turn, get your berry back, and just have unlimited citrus berries, and it gives it a lot of sustain. This guy gets a ton of really good moves. This Pokemon was, historically, Exeggutor is Wolfie VGC's favorite Pokemon, and it was the Pokemon that was given out at the World Championships in 2017 as the event Pokemon that you're able to get for entering that event. But it gets Flamethrower, which is very uncommon for these grass dragons to get. It gets access to Sludge Bomb, which is uncommon for dragons to get. But more importantly than that, it also gets access to like Sleep Powder, which is like, I think, something that no other real dragon gets. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think any of these guys get Sleep Powder. I think the coolest thing it gets, though, is Trick Room. It gets Trick Room, and I think it's actually one of the better Trick Room users. If you guys actually remember, I used to use a really, really cool Sunroom team that featured Alolan Exeggutor. I feel Alolan Exeggutor and Torkoal go together like 2 peas in a pod, because the Harvest is also increased if it's in the sun, the percent chance that you get your berry back. And so it's so cool to see those two Pokemon. Like, what's Torkoal weak against? Like, you know, water and rock and ground and stuff like that. Like, Alone Exeggutor resists all that. What's Exeggutor weak against? Like, flying. Torkoal's bulky, it can eat that. But it's also weak against the, like, ice type, and Torkoal resists that very easily. And fairy types, Torkoal resists that as well. So these two Pokemon go very well together. You can see this set here is, I think, one from, like, Let's Go or something. But it can be physical, it can be special. It has a bunch of really good abilities, and I think it does bring a lot to the table. And so, like, you're like, why are you rating it so low? I just feel it doesn't really, like, stack up. Like, I feel that, like, yeah, it's a cool Trick Room setter, but, like, is it a cooler Trick Room setter than, like, Cresselia or Porygon 2? Probably not. And so, is it, like, cool to get Sleep Powder? Is it a better Sleep Powder user than Venusaur? Probably not. It's definitely, like, a best of one Mon. And that's kind of where it falls. You'll see with the rest of the list. Like, you may be thinking, I have so much good things to say about this Pokemon that how could I put it so low? But there's just so many other good dragons. I'm trying to think of historically, like, good placings that this thing has gotten. And I think Exeggutor has some decent placings. It was used in 2019 a little bit. It was used in other previous formats a little bit. Exeggutor being the Kanto version, the Psychic Grass type. That thing's got some decent placings over the years. But Alone Exeggutor doesn't really have the same, like, bulk. Not really bulk. It just doesn't have the same. It doesn't pack the same punch as that Exeggutor. And so it kind of just falls short and always ends up as much like a meme pick. And I do think that has to do a lot with the fact that it's Wolf's favorite Pokemon. So, like, he's the guy that kind of uses it, and he only ever uses it when he really wants to, like, mess around you like a joke team. And so, like, sometimes those end up doing well, and it makes people think that it's better than it is. But historically, it just doesn't really have the same results. Like, I always have fun when I use it, and that's about as far as it goes. And up next is a Pokemon that I don't really ever use that much, but I will rate it. Where are we actually at? So we got 25, 24, 23, 22, 21. The 20th best dragon, or 19th, we're on 19th. 19th best dragon is gonna be Dragalge. Dragalge. I never use this thing. I always just call this the poison dragon. I know there's multiple poison dragons, but this is what I like to call it. This thing gets adaptability, and that's its biggest selling point. For those of you guys that don't know what adaptability is, I'm gonna give you guys a crash course right now. So adaptability, it says powers up moves of the same type as this Pokemon. So that means all of your poison attacks and dragon attacks get an additional 1.5 boosts. So they already get stabbed. So, like, for example, let's take a look at Dragon Pulse. So, like, Dragon Pulse is an 85, so it's already stabbed, so it's getting a 1.5 boost and then an adaptability boost, so it's getting a ×2 boost. So you're getting pretty much a double stab boost on all of your stab moves, and that's really, really cool. You know, other Pokemon that get adaptability like Porygon Z are some of the best Pokemon in the game, and it makes it so this guy is pretty much a delete button with its stab moves. And even in, like, a max mode, you're still getting big KOs with those max oozes with, like, a Life Orb or, like, a Weakness Policy proc adaptability set. This guy's gotten some great results in Sword and Shield, and I think Sword and Shield's probably been, you know, the best thing that's ever happened to this Pokemon. Just because, like, it's so common to see this guy paired with Dusclops because they go so well together. And, you know, they just go protect the Dragalge or switch it in or something, and then go for a Trick Room with the Dusclops, and the next turn the Dusclops procs a Bulldoze. It makes their Dragalge even slower. It's great because it can actually work inside of a Trick Room, you know. Unlike things like Tyrantrum or Druddigon, this thing is slow enough to work in the Trick Room. It has great synergy with that Bulldoze, making it even slower. And then it's able to just one-shot everything after getting a Weakness Policy proc from taking super effective damage from the Bulldoze. I also think another really good thing this thing has going for it, unlike a lot of the other dragons on this list, is this thing has a stab move dedicated to removing things that it's weak against. Obviously, it can hit other dragons with dragon attacks, but it can use its poison typing to deal super effective stab adaptability boosted poison damage to any and all fairies, and it's super, super good. I think it also does still get, like, Flamethrower. This thing also gets, like, water attacks, and that's actually kind of unique. It gets, like, Hydro Pump. You see this one. I just leveled this thing up for this video, but it does learn, like, water attacks as well. So it's actually really, really cool to always have, like, a little bit of a potential to change the weather. We're starting to get to the situation where, like, I only have good things to say about these Pokemon because their base stat totals are so high and they do such cool things. And realistically, I've not used this guy a lot. I would definitely rather use, you know, other Pokemon than this guy, but, you know, I've seen a lot of people do it. This thing has gotten, you know, top cuts in a lot of online tournaments for Sword and Shield. And I think if we would have done regionals, this thing would have probably definitely had, like, 2 or 3 placings for sure if the regional circuit didn't get shut down. But the next Pokemon on the list, the next Pokemon, the 18th may surprise you. It may surprise you. It's a Pokemon. It's probably the Pokemon that if we were to make these videos for singles and tier them for like Smogon singles, this Pokemon would probably be in the top 3, I would say. But because it's doubles, it's so much harder to use this Pokemon. Like, oh my gosh, there's not that many. I don't think it actually has like any significant CP placings. Maybe like a couple PCs, but that's gonna be Haxorus. And I think Haxorus, it's such a shame because this thing was like the king of Gen 5 in my opinion. I love Haxorus. It gets so much it's the best Pokemon. Like this Pokemon screams like Gen 4 energy. I know it came out in Gen 5, but like this Pokemon just has that Gen 4 playstyle. It's a very one-dimensional physical attacker. It's a mono dragon, so it only takes that one-time super effective weakness to ice. It's still weak against fairy, obviously, but this guy gets Mold Breaker, and this was one of the first Pokemon that really did that with Mold Breaker, where they're like, oh man, this is the thing that beats Rotom. That's what this is. This is the dragon that literally Mold breaks the walls down. It gets taunt. A lot of these dragons, for how good they are, like Salamence and Dragonite and Garchomp, they don't get taunt. Like, this guy just screams, like, I'm gonna sweep you energy. And you guys know in singles, I'm a huge fan of Haxorus as an amazing shiny version. Unfortunately, this thing is a little bit on the slow side. It's base 97 speed, and a lot of these other dragons are base 100 or higher, which means if you're using Haxorus and you're ever fighting against any other dragon, you're automatically slower than them and you're sad. Historical sets for this guy, a lot of choice sets. This guy plays similar to a lot of the ways people like to play aggressive Garchomps. Scarf sets are popular. I've seen Life Orb and Lumberry sets as well. And I do think I actually plan on using a decent amount of this guy once like the meta kind of slows down and we're done with all this Players Cup stuff. Haxorus is definitely one of my favorite Pokemon overall in just the history of the game. And I think it's really, really cool moves. And in any meta where there's a Mimikyu, I'll be there with my Haxorus to show him what's up. But Haxorus is really cool. And let's look at the list. Let's actually just take a second to reorganize this list. Are there some dragons you think that I should have put higher or lower or already used or not used? I bet you guys are still mad that I put Flygon at last. That's probably true. If you guys are still mad that I put Flygon at last, stay mad because I'll always doubt Flygon. All right, let's see. The next Pokemon on this list is a Pokemon who actually, like, as weird as this sounds, I think I might have the best results with. Because, like, remember, regionals for Sword and Shield were shut down after, like, one event. And I went, like, 6-4 at that event with one of these Pokemon. And that is... it's going to be Appleton. Our boy. We just got done making an amazing Appleton team. We actually just got done using a weakness policy Appleton team. But this is the Appleton set that I did okay with at Dallas Regionals. It's a team built around Appleton. Appleton gets Recover, Iron Defense, and Amnesia. Remember, it gets Thick Fat. It's another one of those Grass Dragon typings that we talked a lot about. And Thick Fat is super cool on this guy because it makes it so that Ice weakness that is 4 times is actually only 2 times. And, like, because we're so thick and because we have access to Amnesia and most Ice type attacks are special, like, doesn't really care. It can just kind of eat Ice attacks. Like, I think in the video where I used that Appleton, I ate, like, 3 max Hailstorms in a row. And was, like, totally fine on, like, an aggressive Appleton that was, like, a weakness policy set. I think I used to run this thing with, I've ran this thing like Wikiberry, I've ran this thing with Leftovers, but, like, those weakness policy sets that we showed off the other day are actually really, really cool as well. It also gets access to a G-Max Mon, a G-Max version, which turns your grass attack into a move that fully heals any status conditions from your team. I actually think you're just better off going with the regular not G-Max option, just because I think having terrain control and always having a grassy terrain on teams that like grassy terrain is always a valuable idea. Similar to Falafel, who has Gravity Apple, Appleton has a really, really cool move that targets a special attacking slot called Apple Acid. So it attacks the target with an acidic liquid created from tart apples. This target also lowers the target's special defense stats. So even against like Incineroars, even against things that resist Appleton, if you go to the late game, you get a couple boosts. This thing can like 1v1 or even 1v2, 1v3, 1v4 teams down, just because you can get their defenses so low, their special defense so low, that eventually just start doing 40, 50, sometimes 60, 70% with these Apple Acids. So it makes for a great grindy Mon, and it has a completely different playstyle from like any other Pokemon on this list. I think it also does get like Leech Seed and another bunch of really, really cool moves, and it plays more like a Ferrothorn or a Celesteal. It definitely does play more to its grass typing than other dragons, and a lot of you guys probably think that I'm putting it a little bit too high on this list, but that's just because I think this Pokemon is really, really cool. It's a lot of fun to use. And as far as the Sword and Shield meta does go, I do think that when you're playing a Pokemon that says like let's talk about Guzzlord, for example, and I'm getting ahead of myself. Guzzlord, I said one of the things holding it back is if you get put behind, there's no way to come back. There's no real recovery options. It doesn't have the speed. It doesn't really have the bulk. You kind of just slowly lose if you're put behind. If you're put behind with Appleton, it has such unique typing. You can switch correctly. There's a bunch of different things you can do. It has access to recovery, stat boosting, stat decreasing moves for the opponent. There's definitely ability to like wait out opponents' Dynamaxes, gain a solid board position, and then, you know, repunch with your own timing attack with like another teammate that you have that has Dynamax. And so this Pokemon, it gives Dragon types the ability to play a little bit longer game, which is not something they're really known for. Dragon types are more of like a race to the finish, like aggressive typing. And so I think Appleton is like the bridge that we need to get those bulky Dragon types back to a good state in the meta. And that's why I'm putting it as high as I'm putting it, which isn't even in like the top 15. But you know what? Appleton's awesome. And I think as far as like 485 base stat Pokemon go, I think that's its base stat total. Like competing with like Naganadels and Latioses and stuff, I think Appleton's doing a pretty good job. Up next is a Pokemon that I think a lot of people thought I would have probably already talked about. But I do actually rate this thing right now. And actually, if we're going to take a meta look at the like January 2021 meta, I think this is one of the biggest sleeper picks right now. And that's going to be Goodra. I think Goodra brings so much to the table. I think, first of all, the best thing Goodra has going for it is that Goodra is a mono dragon typing, similar to like Haxorus and a couple other dragons. So it doesn't have that 4x Ike's weakness, which means in reality, so let's think about, I guess I should have talked about this at the start of the video. What uses ice attacks? Like, just think about it. First thing that comes to your mind is probably like Lapras, right? So as long as you're not fighting Lapras, and if you are fighting Lapras, cool. There's 1,000 other ways to deal with Lapras, right? But as long as you're not fighting Lapras, what's using ice attacks? Like sometimes Feeney's carry Icy Wind, Cresselias, Porygons, those both pack Ice Beam. There's not a ton. There's not a ton of it. You could say Darmanitan, but like those are 1 out of every 30 teams you'll fight a Darmanitan. And even if you do, all you gotta do is intimidate it once and Goodra's thick enough. Basically what I'm saying is Goodra has the thickness to really, you know, I was talking about Appleton being the bridge to like getting that thick bulk value dragon. Goodra is exactly what you need to play that value game. It works great with Assault Vest. It works great with a weakness policy. Even before like Sword and Shield had like Dynamax and like everyone was running like weakness policy Dynamax mons, like Goodra was doing that in like 2017, 2018. You know, it has really good abilities as well. It gets access to Gooey, which we're using right here. I actually think this is a really underrated ability right now. I think Gooey's very, very good. So if anything makes contact with it, it lowers their speed stat by 1. So it's a really cool way to like work in speed control. So like if you know that they're using like an Urshifu Dark or something like that, you could switch in like a really bulky physical Goodra, give it a speed drop, and then like you just outspeed them with your Goodra, and it's like, sucks to be you, right? It's like a perfect Urshifu counter right there. Switching in on fake outs is always a really cool way to give speed control to the opponent. Or sorry, like take away speed control from the opponent. But it also gets really good abilities like Sap Sipper. That's what most people like to use it with. They like to use it as Sap Sipper. It also gets Hydration. You know, I actually took Hydration Goodra to Worlds in 2017, which that's probably one of the reasons why I rate this Pokemon so much higher, is because I like built my Worlds team around Goodra in 2017. And it's just, I think it's a really good Pokemon. It gets amazing physical and special coverage. And it can be played so many different ways. You see, like I said, the Vest sets. I've seen Leftovers sets. I've seen Life Orb sets. This Pokemon has gotten regional top cuts in every single format since its release in Gen 6. And, you know, I really do think that, like, this is a Pokemon that's very splashable. Because you can kind of put a Goodra in your team and, like, think of how many teams, like, can't do anything against it. Like, this thing kind of just says, because they have to always respect your Sap Sipper, it's like, damn, they have a Goodra, I can't bring my Ferrothorn, because there's never a way Ferrothorn will be able to put Leech Seed on it, can't do anything against it. Goodras usually pack the Flamethrower. They also get like Sludge Bomb, they get Thunderbolt, Dragon Stabs. This thing gets a lot of really, really cool stuff, and I think it does bring a lot to the table. Also, it's a pretty decent shiny as well, and I'm a fan of all of its abilities. I think they're all really, really good. I ran like a Rest Hydration Goodra at Worlds, and that was such a fun set. I think I had like Rain Dance, Rest, like Toxic, and like I probably ran like one other move that was, you know, tech choice. But it was such a cool Pokemon. Also gets like Acid Spray, which is really, really cool. Sharp lowers our special D. Makes for a great partner for like Tapu Fini and stuff like that. But let's see. Up next on the list, another Pokemon that's much better in singles, one that we have already covered, and I think that's going to be Hydragon. So we're starting now to get, you can see our list is starting to dwindle. We're starting to get to that third evolution. We just got done with Goodra, like those pseudo legendary Pokemon that have the really, really high base stat totals. And we're going to put Hydragon here, and I do think Hydragon is just the victim of the meta. The meta being like Dynamax being really big. Hydragon's most prominent items in previous formats were Scarf and Specs, and it only has a 98 base speed. So like you have to run the Scarf, otherwise you get outsped by the other dragons. And if you're Scarf Hydragon, first of all, you don't even KO some of these dragons, and you definitely don't KO anything in max mode, even if you're using like a super effective attack. Like if I lead with Hydragon and you lead with Latios, and I go for a Scarf Draco Meteor against your Dynamax Latios, I won't KO it, right? And then you just auto lose because you're down them on. They know, like, there's no way you come back from that. There are ways to come back, but you get what I mean. You use, there's no way that the most common ways to run this Pokemon just fit into today's meta. But this Pokemon historically has a ton of results. This Pokemon has gotten literally thousands of CP, probably, at least 10 regional top cuts a year since its release back in, I think this was a Gen 5 Mon. Yeah, it was this thing in Haxorus that were the Gen 5, like, pseudo-dragons. This thing is so good. I've always been more of a Haxorus guy, but let's compare this guy to a thing that we already talked about earlier. Like, Hydragon is a dragon type that, first of all, again, it's a dark dragon, so it has 4 times weakness to fairy, but it only has a 2 times weakness to ice. It also has a weakness to fighting, which is kind of not great for the meta right now. But if we compare it to Flygon, right, it's only a little bit slower. It's a ton stronger. It has better stab. They both have levitate. Like, this guy is an example of, like, the power creep to why, like, Hydragon is, like, a much better version of, like, Flygon. It's a much more polished special attacker dragon. And I think it does bring, like, a lot to the table. It also, you can see this set gets Belch. It also gets Beat Up. I think it's a very underrated Beat Up user if you're going to use those Scarf sets. Beat Up's great. Belch, like I was talking about briefly, it makes so if you want to go like Dynamax and go for those really, really big, like max poisons to get other fairies, it's actually a pretty good option. Obviously you need to be using a berry to use it in not max mode, but if you're just going to be using it in max mode, it's actually a pretty decent option. I think having Dark Pulse and Draco Meteor, like historically when Cresselias have been really big, this was one of the few ways to like break Cresselia Dusclops teams like back in the day. It was very uncommon to see really, really, really big dark special attackers. We didn't have the Glare Moltres we have now. We didn't have the Urshifu. So it was very uncommon to see those big dark attackers. And Hydragon was one of the first Pokemon to really pioneer that playstyle and, put a lot of pressure on Dusclopses. So it definitely reserves a spot at the higher part of this list, but I wouldn't really put it in like the top 10, which is sad because again, if this was a singles list, like Scarf Hydragon, great against like Dragapult and things like that in singles if you can already make your opponent waste their Dynamax in something else. In singles, like Haxorus and Hydragon are probably in my top 5 if I were to do this for singles. But up next is going to be a Pokemon that a lot of you guys are probably wondering, a lot of you guys are looking at this list thinking, why is this dragon still up there? What does he have to say about this dragon? And that's going to be our boy Noivern. We can't, this Noivern's actually a cool set. We'll look at this Noivern. So Noivern actually gets a ton of cool things that other dragons don't. Noivern does what other dragons don't, because Noivern plays more like a suicide lead, more like a Crobat. It gets access to Taunt, it gets access to Tailwind, and has a much higher base speed than most of the dragons on this list. It also still gets access to like Flamethrower, it gets like a Stabbed Hurricane / Air Slash. It gets all the things that like the other dragons have, being just a little bit weaker. But historic like Sash sets on this guy are really, really good. It also has access to a couple really, really good abilities. Again, it has Frisk, which is one of the better abilities in the game, but it also has Soundproof, which means like it's immune to those, it doesn't get Soundproof. Incorrect. Close. It gets Telepathy, which I would say is better actually, because you compare it with teams that like hit everything. So like historically back in the day, you used to see like in 2014, you used to see like people lead like Noivern and Exploud, and you would go like Boom Burst with both of them because they both get Boom Burst, and Exploud has a Soundproof, Noivern gets the Telepathy, and so being able to avoid your teammates' attacks like that, it's actually pretty cool. But I do think like probably in terms of who's had the best placings with Noivern, I know Rasta Charmander got like a lot of CP with Noivern in 2014. That's one of his favorite Pokemon. He's an old school player. And then I'm thinking in 2015, you'd see like a Noivern every 2 or 3 regionals. It'd pop in like a top 16. I don't think Noivern has any top 8 appearances, and I don't think it's ever gotten any CP or like placings at Worlds. But I do think it's a very, very good Pokemon. It outspeeds all the other dragons. So like I would say you only really see Noivern at a fully developed meta, because once people really get locked in, like I was talking about in 2014 when it was actually at its most popular, there were times when everyone was running. Like a lot of teams had 2 dragons in it. They usually had a Salamence and a Garchomp. Noivern outspeeds both of them, right? So you're starting to see like situations where like when metas get really, really polished, Noivern can kind of get in there and be the dragon type that has like Tailwind. He gets access to Taunt. Using this as Super Fang. It was actually used on a round team. For those of you guys who don't know how round works, it works kind of like pledge attacks. So like if one thing uses round, it'll pull the other thing. If both your ones use round, it'll pull the other one's speed up and use it right after the Noivern. So I can go for like a Choice Scarf round or like a Sash round with my Noivern on its really high base speed. And then if I want to use like a Choice Specs Pixelate Stab Sylveon using round, it'll pull it up and immediately use it. That's what this team was for. But yeah, I think Noivern brings a lot to the table, and it plays a lot more like a support Pokemon, but like that aggressive support Pokemon. And so I definitely think it's worth having this high. And I do want to say that a lot of that has to do with Frisk and it's just overall base speed tiering, but like Noivern looks amazing too. I think actually some of my most popular videos are ones that like have Noivern in the thumbnail. I even put Noivern in this thumbnail just because like Noivern's awesome and a lot of people know it is. Up next, a Pokemon. We were talking about Pokemon like hacksaws that like screamed Gen 4 energy. Now this next one doesn't scream Gen 4 energy, but if this Pokemon was like out in Diamond and Pearl, like what people know as Pokemon. I don't know if you guys, I'll give you a little history lesson. So like back in the day of singles, there used to be the Skarm Bliss core, where people used Skarmory and Blissey, and it was such a good core because Blissey walled special attacks and Skarmory walled physical attacks, and together they set up hazards and just, they both have recovery moves, and it was so hard to beat, and it was like the Noob Slayer combo, right? And there were no Pokemon that could really do it, and the ones that could do it, you know, like Salamence and Garchomp, because you put like a fire attack on each of them, and then just use your big dragon stabs against the Blissey. You know, those guys eventually got banned because they were so good at breaking down those walls. But if this Pokemon existed back then, it would have been the best freaking Pokemon in the world. And that's Comao. And I think Comao, historically, is amazing. I think right now, it's really hard to use Comao because it's a dragon fighting typing. Which means it could have been just using fighting types against both Blissey and Skarmory back in the day. But it has a 4 times weakness to Fairy, similar to a lot of the other Pokemon on this list. But this thing gets really good abilities, I think. It gets Bulletproof, which means it can switch in and take immune damage from like any like bullety moves, which are like Sludge Bomb, Focus Blast. There's a lot of Seed Bomb, I think. There's a lot of weird moves that are categorized right there that you can block with Bulletproof. But it also actually gets Soundproof, which is great at blocking those big hyper voices like I was talking about earlier. It blocks Perish Songs. It blocks Snarls. There's so many actually sound-based moves. You'd be really surprised what is a sound-based move. And the last one that it gets is Overcoat, right? So it doesn't take those Sandstorm damage. And I've still thought to this day that Overcoat should block Leech Seed, but it doesn't, and that's stupid. But all 3 of those abilities can be used in so many different teams that your opponent really... Komo's one of the few Pokemon that like bluffs all 3 abilities. And like if I have a Como in the back of my team, like my opponent might not go for the Shadow Ball Sludge Bomb combo. Like, this thing is a perfect check to Gengar. Like, Gengar can't really Perish Song it. Gengar can't Sludge Bomb it, can't Shadow Ball it. And, like, there's so many cool things that can come to the table with Comao. In previous gens, in 2019, it got access to, actually in 2018, sorry, it got access to the Comao Z move, the Clangorous Soul Blaze move, right? The Cling Clang Soul Blaze move. And that would give it, it was the first AoE. Now, was that an AoE move? Was that actually an AoE move? It was a Z move, right? That just did massive damage straight up. It just straight up did massive damage. And it gave you a +1 boost to all your stats. It was a little mini Geomancy. And again, it was really hard to use Como back then because there were so many fairies, all the Tapus and stuff like that. And it has that 4 times weakness. And all they have to do is switch in the fairies. And if they switch in the fairies, your Z move doesn't really work because you don't ever get to hit anything, which means you don't get the +1 boost. But now... now we have Clangorous Soul, which works a little bit differently. So Clangorous Soul is a move that only Como gets. So the user raises all its stats by sacrificing 25% of its HP. So this is actually like really cool because first of all, you can go for multiple of these if you actually want to. And I really think it has great synergy with the Throat Spray that we're using. The Throat Spray says raise a special attack when a Pokemon using a sound-based move. So that can be either your Clanging Scales, which is a sound-based move, or the Clangorous Soul itself is a sound-based move. So you actually get a +2 boost to special attack and then a +1 boost to all your other stats. This guy can be physical or special. Tons of top cut places over the years. This is definitely one of my favorite dragons. Like, I know a lot of people aren't like really a fan of comao, but there's just something about comao that like I always feel like I'm gonna win if I have one of these guys. Like I always feel like I'm so ahead whenever I decide to use comao, because he has just such unique typing. Yeah, he has weaknesses like flying, fairy, ice. There are a lot of weaknesses there, but like a good setup comao can do so many things. You know, we fought against Diamond More Than 5's comao set recently, and I'm probably gonna use that rental team relatively soon. That was like a really cool like iron defense body press comao. It gets access to like dragon tail. I think it still gets stealth rocks in this gen. You'd be surprised the amount of TRs this thing gets. I implore you guys to actually take a look at this Pokemon. You'd be really, really surprised to see the amount of like physical special support moves this guy gets. And it's rocking an amazing base stat total. It has just enough speed to be used. And I've always thought this guy's really cool. Similar to Guzzlord, having that 4-time weakness to fairy, it baits your opponent's fairies into coming guaranteed. You know, and we can pack our flash cannons unlike Guzzlord and pack like poison jabs unlike Guzzlord to actually deal significant damage to those fairies before they can take us out. So comao is definitely a Pokemon worth looking at for future. And then we're on to the top 12. The top 12. What are they going to be? We got a lot of Pokemon left. And this video's been going for a long time. And hopefully you guys are still here. Hopefully you guys like this video, because this has taken me a long time to actually, because I have to actually take and like write out like a lot of this stuff and think about what I'm going to talk about. But the next one on this list is going to be Latius. I think Latius is going to be up next on this list. You can see this set right here is the Coldberry set that I popularized along with a few other content creators a couple months ago. It makes it so it has a great matchup versus like Urshifu Dark, being able to reduce the damage from psychic attacks. Sorry, dark attacks because of its psychic typing. And again, very, very unique typing on this guy. It's a psychic dragon, but it can't learn Trick Room, which is unfortunate. And it gets access to like Tailwind, Mystical Fire, Ally Switch. This was a Bulldoze set. The best thing Latius actually has going for it is its speed stat. It's actually base 110. So it's one of the bulkier mons on this list, but it has a really, really high base speed stat, so it's able to like outvalue other walls. Historically, in other formats, you would see this thing go for like Calm Mind setups. It was one of the Pokemon that used to have a Mega Evolution as well. Mega Latius was pretty good. I think the best regional top cut placing was T-Man. Tommy got, I think he's probably top cut, like, he's at least gotten 2 top 32s with it, and that was in 2018. In 2019, it was a pretty good mon, so whenever we see things transition into more of a restricted meta, this thing's actually pretty good because it has very, very good coverage moves. So, like, let's compare it to the Heatran that's, like, right next to it, right? So Heatran weak to those, like, water, fighting, ground. Like, what does Latius resist? Water, fighting, ground. They make for great Pokemon, great synergy together. And getting Ally Switch is definitely something that a lot of the other Pokemon on this list don't really get. The only thing holding it back from being, I think, a little bit better is it has a little bit of a telegraphed playstyle to where a lot of people have come to expect a lot of these things from the Latius just because it's become so popular lately. And I do feel that, like, if you're gonna be a Latius, like if you're gonna go through all that trouble to run this Pokemon, you might as well just run the next Pokemon on the list, and that's going to be Latios. I do think Latios brings a little bit more to the table because Latios can do all the same things that Latios can. They both have that same 110 base speed, but you have to respect a Latios just a little bit more. The most common set for Latios right now in Sword and Shield is the Weakness Policy. This thing has a this thing is actually, like, I've always liked Latios a little bit more than Hydragon, because if you're going to run Scarf Hydragon and I run Scarf Latios, I'm able to KO you, as well as every other dragon for the most part, before they can KO me first. I've always been a big fan of this guy. It has pretty decent placings at events over the years. It, unfortunately, I don't think has a regionals win. I don't think it has a regionals win at all, or like a world's top cut, but I do think it actually does bring a lot to the table. And if we're comparing it to Latius, it's pretty much just a more aggressive variant. You know, with Latius, you would go with like Calm Mind and more like bulk value support. But with Latios, you're able to go like Weakness Policy, Scarf, Life Orb, Specs, and you can actually still pick up those KOs, because these guys actually used to be like banned. Like in singles formats, these guys were banned all the way up until Gen 5. And, you know, I still think they're really good. I think both of them really good. I think it is a bit of a personal preference which one you like more. If you like playing a little bit defensive or a little bit more offensive. Again, like I was talking about, like with this Pokemon right here, the Bulldoze, Ally Switch, Mystical Fire, Tailwind, I can do all those things if I want to with the Latios. I can do those same exact things, rock the Coldberry run in the exact same way, but if I'm running the Latios, you have to respect my ability to function as a Latios as well and deal a lot more damage. So it gives a lot more like 50-50s for your opponent to deal with just running this Pokemon. If you're going to be playing a little bit more of like an aggressive Latius that has like this speed stat, like this is the common This is the common set because, like I said, you really have to maximize that speed stat with this guy to max out that base 110 to guarantee outspeed base 100s and force other base 110s to speed tie you. That's a very, very good like speed tier for Sword and Shield right now. And so since you're running it that like offensive, you might as well just do all that on a Latios, in my opinion, and also have access to go for like that big Draco meter to get the big one-hit KOs. Also, like Psyshock. Both those guys get like Psyshock, and it makes them and Comao, probably a few of the dragons can actually function as mixed sweepers, which is really, really cool. All right, and then there were 10. There's only 10 dragons left, right? There's only 10? Yeah. Man, we're into the top 10. The top 10. One of these things is not like the others, in my opinion. And I think it's actually only really good because it's been good in Sword and Shield. And I think that's going to be Dracozolt. Now, I think Dracozolt is really cool. You can see it has that hustle ability that we talked about earlier on Falafel. And it's the first electric dragon on this list, similar to Zekrom's typing. So that means it actually doesn't have as many weaknesses as a lot of these other dragon typings that have dual stabs. So it's actually able to, like, electric typing is very, very good defensively. Like, it resists flying, it resists other electrics, and its only weakness is ground. And so you can definitely mitigate that through the use of, like, redirection or like wide guards and things like that. So having ground as your only weakness, it's actually a really good thing. So it makes it so you basically just have two very, very strong offensive typings. Access to Aerial Ace for Airstream. Bolt Beak is another really, really good move on this guy. So Bolt Beak, for those guys who don't know, is a move that I think only this thing, no, this thing and the other fossils get it. But it says the user stabs a target with its electrified beak. If the user attacks before the target, the power of this move is doubled. So it's similar to Dracovich's Vicious Ram, where it doubles the damage. And it just deals so much through the use of Hustle. This thing historically has been used with like Assault Vest. We've seen Life Orb, we've seen Choice Scarf, we've seen Choice Band, we've seen Lumberry. This thing has done a lot in Sword and Shield, and it's got a lot of like online tournament top cuts. I think it's also like done well in a couple of those Players Cups. Like teams built around Dracozolt are actually really, really popular. And I think one of the reasons why is, again, when you Dynamax those Hustle Mons, you're able to get the boost from Hustle while still being in max mode. So you still get that 1.5. And if you throw like a Life Orb on top of that, with it, which is its most common item, you could just like one-shot other max Mons, which is actually really, really cool. And then if you want to go for that Bolt Beak, it turns into Max Lightning, which means you can't get put to sleep. So you historically see this guy just built like full speed, full attack. And I guess I should also talk about, it does get access to Sand Rush, thanks to the hidden abilities being able to be received through the ability patch in the Crown Tundra. So I've seen a couple Sand Rushes, but I still think that Hustle's better. Like, I actually think you should just run like a Hustle Dracozolt on like a Sand team. And so like, oh no, it's Sand Rush. And then you just like Dynamax. They're respecting your Sand Rush anyways. They're assuming your Sand Rush. You just like one-shot their wall that they try to switch in to block your Sand Rush Dracovich. That's how I personally think it should be played. And I do think it's a great Pokemon. But it's one of the few Pokemon on this list that's still around that isn't one of those like pseudo-legendaries or like third evolutions or something like that. So shout out to Dracozolt for making it this far in the list. And it's probably only going to get more usage as like time goes on. I think once Dynamax leaves as a mechanic in whatever next generation we get, this Pokemon's going to shoot down and be not as good, because the reason it's so consistent is because like you can Dynamax to take advantage of that Hustle, and if you can start missing moves, like the way to beat Dracozolt is just to wait out the Dynamax turns, and then they can potentially just miss all their Bolt Beaks and stuff like that, and then you're fine. So and also you can like intimidate this thing into the ground. That's one thing that like is really good against it. So like Landorus, for example, is like amazing versus Pokemon, and so like that in itself is keeping Dracozolt out of like the top 5 in my opinion. All right, so there's a lot of dragons left. There's a lot of really popular dragons left too. And so this is where we're going to put our first super popular dragon. And a lot of you guys are like, what? You're not putting this one as number 1? It's the best Pokemon in the world. And it's going to be Dragonite. I think Dragonite is a great Pokemon. I think Dragonite has a lot going for it. It was the first OG dragon from Gen 1 rocking that dragon flying typing. And it also has Multiscale as its hidden ability. Both of its abilities are actually really good. So let's take a look at Multiscale first. So it says, reduces the amount of damage this Pokemon takes while its HP is at full. So when this thing's at full, any amount of damage it takes is reduced by half. So you can use this thing with like a Leftovers. That's what I actually like to use. My very first regional I ever went to for Pokemon, I used a Leftovers Dragonite, and it was super good. You're just always able to like recap yourself off to protect. Leftovers give you a little bit of sustain, make it so if they go for the fake out, next turn you're still back at full to regain that multi-scale. But like historically in the past, you've seen like banded sets really well. Obviously everyone's talking about, that's why you talked about the weakness policy set on Dragonite. That's the best set on this guy. And the reason why it's not is just because it's so telegraphed. Like, people aren't gonna just throw their ice slash fairy slash rock attacks into your full health Dragonite and let the multi-scale do all its work. They're just not going to. Past like any sort of like, once you get into Master Ball tier, you're probably not going to get those free weakness policy procs in this guy unless they're just misplaying, right? And so you can't really play to your opponents being bad, which means if I'm rocking a Dragonite, I can actually almost assume that you're not going to go for those super effective attacks, which means I'm probably just going to run like a Lumberry, which I think right now is probably the best item on this guy. And so it forces it when you actually want to go for those Will-O-Wisps, which are super popular right now on all those Dragapults, all the Ghost Horses and things, and those Thunder Waves from like Grimmsnarls. Like, a lot of people are going for those type of things. It's a lot better just to make them waste their time doing those, get a Lumberry proc, and then after that, they wasted too much time respecting your weakness policy that you don't even have. You could have been setting up Dragon Dances. You can go for E-Speeds, Outrages, whatever you want. This thing can set, Airstreams by itself by using Hurricanes or Dual Wing Beat. It has a lot going for it. And its other ability, Inner Focus, means it can't actually be flinched. So, and it also is immune to Intimidate. So I actually think a really good way to run Dragonite right now is like Inner Focus, Lumberry. So you're immune to Intimidate and you're immune to getting flinched, and you like have a built-in like Will-O-Wisp remover. It's so good. And it forces people to respect so many more options, but you can see because I like running those like weird Dragonite sets that like force your opponent to respect a lot of our options. That's why I'm putting it a little bit lower. I think a lot of people would probably want to see Dragonite in like the top 4, top 5 because it has amazing base stat total, but I feel it's wasting a little bit of its stats. Like, it has a subpar base speed of only 80. It has a great attack stat of base 130. It has a solid special attack stat. I think it's like actually 100. But again, like, if we're looking at some of these other dragons where they take some of those special attack stats and put it in the speed or the attack, and they start to min-max themselves just a little bit more, and Dragonite's a little bit too well-rounded, I believe, to really be in like the top 5 or the top 3, unfortunately. And we're gonna take a look at the next example, which is gonna be the 7th, right? We're gonna look at the 7th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, we take it 8. So the 8th best dragon is gonna be Salamence. So Salamance's very similar to Dragonite. They're both flying dragons, right? They're both flying dragons. Similar-ish abilities, right? Intimidate is a defensive ability, right? And it lowers both Pokemon's attack stats. The first Pokemon on this list actually has Intimidate, which I actually think is probably the most common, like, commonly accepted best ability in doubles. And like, they're both defensive abilities, like Inner Focus defensive ability, Multi-Scale defensive ability, Intimidate defensive ability. But Salamence has a much higher base special attack. I think it has I think it actually has higher attack. I think it's actually 135. Maybe it's the same, but I thought it was 135. And it has a higher base speed. So higher speed, higher special attack, better defensive ability, and more attack. Like, I think Salamence has a lot more going for it than Dragonite does most of the time. Historically, Salamence used to have that Mega Evolution as well. Being able to go Mega Salamence, it used to get Aerialates, and then you're able to go for like all your normal attacks, which turn into flying attacks, and then you get like a 1.2 boost, so like Double Edge, even Hyper Beam, Giga Impact, Hyper Voice. Those were all moves. Salamence has actually had amazing, amazing results at every single regional, pretty much ever since it's been a Pokemon. Starting in 2014 is when Salamence really did start to take off. You would see it as a niche pick in 2013, but it didn't really have a ton of like usage. But then going to 2014, it was the most common Choice Scarf Revenge KO mon. I would say like it was one of those mons that like 5 to 6 of the teams and like most of the regional top cuts for like the first half of that year had a Choice Scarf Salamence. Every single person ran Timid, Choice Scarf, Draco Meteor, Salamence. That was everywhere in 2014. Everywhere. For the whole year, for the most part. Just because it was so consistent. Meta was so much more aggressive. It was a great deal with Kang. In 2015, that's when Salamence got its Mega Evolution, so you started seeing a ton more Mega Salamence because, again, it's that big check to Kang. 2016, no different. Amazing. It works so good in restricted formats. It works great as a partner for, like, Groudon, for example. Groudon Mega Salamence, and even just regular Salamence. Those two go together like peas in a pod. 2017... Salamence was still great. You didn't have its Mega Evolution, but it was still a great Pokemon. 2018 is the year that Salamence won the World Championships. I think Paul Ruiz was the guy that did that, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the year that he won, but his team was built around Salamence. Whatever, he either won 2018 or 2019. Yeah, he won in 2018. He built his team around Mega Salamence. It's his favorite Pokemon, and this Pokemon would get, dozens and dozens of top cuts at regionals throughout the years. I think Salamence is great. I also think it's, again, really, really good in singles. but we haven't seen a ton of it in Sword and Shield, right? We haven't seen a ton of it. And I think that's just because a lot of people like to use Salamence as like a policy enabler with like Bulldoze. That's how most people tend to play it nowadays in Sword and Shield. And so I generally feel like that Assault Vest, like Bulldoze Salamence, isn't that hot right now. I still think it's good. It also, I will say it also gets Moxie, which is pretty good, especially on like the singles format. Every time it gets a KO, it gets an attack boost. But I feel that like if you're going to be running like an aggressive Salamence, like we have so many other Pokemon on this list that can be better at being aggressive and can more easily carry a team. Like if we're looking at like dominating the meta right now, what's the meta? Like Regielekis are everywhere. One Electro Web and Salamence is pretty much just like, he's already not that fast. It's base 100. So like you're already like, if they Electro Web you with the Regieleki, you're within Moonblast range for Feeny, and then you just lose. So it's stuff like that that's holding Salamence back from being like a really, really popular meta pick again. But I think as far as Intimidators go, once we get done seeing a ton of like competitive Defiant Mons in the meta, we'll probably start seeing a decent more number of Salamence again. And again, a lot of these Pokemon, I haven't really talked about it, are all like super checked by Ice Horse. So that's why like some of them you think should be higher. They just like cannot be used because that Pokemon exists. And it's unfortunate. One of the only Pokemon that can really put up a fight against it is the Comao. And sucks for Comao because there's so many fairies. But up next, we're going on to the top 6 with a new addition. A new addition in the Sword and Shield. One that we just got done using very recently. It's not Dracovish. It's going to be Regidrago. I think Regidrago is so freaking cool. This thing gets everything that a Pokemon could ever want. It's a mono dragon type, which we've already established is amazing because it only has that solo ice weakness. And again, we talked about how if they're not stabbing their ice attacks, they're not going to KO you, which means you're totally fine. And this thing gets the ability Dragon's Maw, which gives it like its own steroid to its already stabbed Dragon's moves. And then it gets a move that no other Pokemon gets, which is like a Dragon type Eruption. So it's a 150 base move that's based on your total HP. It doesn't matter how like high your stat total is, it's based off the percentage that you have. So if you're at full, this is a 150 base move. If you're at half, it's going to be a lot weaker. And if you're at like 5 HP, it's going to be like the weakest move ever. But as long as you're at full, this thing will hit everything on your opponent's side and one-shot pretty much everything. I personally like to play this Mon with a Dragon's Fang, which is also giving a 1.2 boost to it. I think that's probably, you know, we see a lot of spec sets on this guy and they go like Tailwind, Regidrago, and they just go for a double one-shot right on turn 1. I personally like the Dragon's Fang because it makes it so I can function a lot more easily as a Dynamax option. And Dynamaxing, going for those base 150 moves that are also boosted by Stab, my Dragon's Maw, and my Dragon's Fang, like I'm still able to do really, really big damage without worrying about preserving my HP totals. I think this Pokemon's really, really good. I think the biggest problem with it is that like fairies are super popular and it's very limited in the ways they can actually deal with them. You see I have Hyper Beam on here to be able to go for max strikes, but its other move pools are pretty limited. And I feel like it's one of those Pokemon that we'll eventually start seeing a lot of play. But I definitely do think that it's still early in this Pokemon getting released, and I think it can only really go up from here. I don't really see this Pokemon getting any worse because you always have to respect the team that has like access to like Prankster Tailwind and Regidrago, or Fake Out Regidrago, or even like a Trick Room like slow Regidrago. Like this thing, it plays very much the way like Torkoal does, and we already know that Torkoal is the best Pokemon in the game. So Regidrago is really, really cool. I like it a lot, and I think it's just a great Pokemon. So then there were not that many. Then there were 5. We have the top 5 dragon types in Sword and Shield. Man, we've been doing this video for a long time. Hopefully you guys have stuck around. I really would appreciate it if you guys, still stuck around to the end of the video. Let's see, what do we got? Top 5. Duraludon. Man, a lot of you guys are probably like, this guy, how is Duraludon stuck around so long? It's like a base Pokemon. It has no evolutions. It's a steel dragon, which means it doesn't have that fairy weakness. It doesn't have that ice weakness, but it does have a fighting and ground weakness. Also, like, it doesn't have that like dragon weakness. Like Duraludon, like so good defensively. Same typing as Dialga. But what really sets Duraludon apart from a lot of these other dragons is it does something that very few Pokemon can do. Its ability Stalwart says it ignores the effects of opposing Pokemon's abilities and moves that draw in moves. So for those guys who don't know, Doubles is very, 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 very much so built around moves like Follow Me and Rage Powder. They like to set up with one Pokemon, then use one Pokemon as like a cleric to like tunnel in attacks through the use of like Follow Me and Rage Powder, which pull in attacks, or Storm Drains, those type of things that pull in attacks, Lightning Rods. pull in attacks to one of the teammates to redirect you from dealing with the threat you actually want to target. Duraludon says Stalwart, he does not care. Like, if I decide to Dynamax this Duraludon and you lead with Indeedee and Dusclops, I can just go for that Max Darkness on that Dusclops, and I don't care if you're going to use Follow Me. And so having the ability to just say, I'm going to one-shot that. Not a lot of Pokemon have that. This thing, I like using weakness policy sets. Assault Vest sets have been very, very popular. But Choice Scarf, Choice Spec sets also do tend to pop up from time to time. I think we also see a decent amount of Life Orb sets. So I would say the biggest problem with Duraludon is it has such abysmal special defense. And so, yeah, you have a really, really good defensive typing, but, like, you're still going to take, like, almost Oko from, like, a Moonblast. So I would say, even though it's very defensively built on, like, the actual defensive side, you can see her, first of all, this Duraludon right here, it has, like, half the special D as the defense stat, even with, like, no investment. People like to go, like, really, really big timid on this guy, and I'm actually really surprised this Pokemon is as good as it is. It has, I think, an 85 base speed, pretty decent special attack, and it makes for a great sweeper. It is a little bit on the slow side, but not so slow that it be used in TR. And I do think that once metas establish themselves, like, we're still riding a little bit of the hype from Crown Tundra, you're going to start to see a lot more Duraludon pop up, because it's one of those Pokemon that says, I'm going to do this, and there's not a dang thing you can do about it. Like, if I'm using a Life Orb Duraludon, and I'm pairing it with, like, a Pokemon that's, like, Helping Hand, I probably, if I use, like, this moveset, can one-shot any of your Pokemon, no matter what. Like, cool. You have a Cresselia, I'm going to go Helping Hand, Life Orb, Max Darkness, and unless you're rocking that Cobra Berry, which they probably are, you're going to get KO'd, which means you're not going to be able to set your TR. And that's one thing that, like, cannot be denied. Like, being able to ignore redirection is humongous, and for that and that alone, it's just put this high. It already has, like, amazing top cut, like, in all the online events that have been around. Like, there's so many people that use Duraludon. Very, very solid Pokemon. And then... But now we're at the 5. Man, I couldn't count. We were at 6. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. We were at 6. I've been doing this. I haven't taken a single break. I've been talking for like an hour and a half. So, like, I apologize. Now we're in the top 5. Top 5, staying alive. Who's it gonna be? We got some solid picks left. And we do have Kingdra. Gonna be 5. And a lot of you guys are probably thinking, like, how are you rating Kingdra this high? There's so many good picks. There's Dragonite, there's Salamence, there's Latios, there's Regidrago. How'd you put Kingdra this high? One answer, Rain. This Pokemon is the Pokemon that carries that whole team comp, everything about it, on its back. Swift Swim Kingdra means it doubles its speed when it's raining. It also gets access to the Sniper ability. This Pokemon has, like, a ton of, like, regional top cuts, because, like I said, it's the Pokemon that literally carries that whole archetype on its back. They gave it access to Hurricane in Sword and Shield, so it can actually go for Airstreams. I actually made a tweet last week saying, like, give Kingdra a snipe shot, like, you cowards, like aiming into, like, TPCI. Like, imagine how cool that'd be. That'd be actually awesome. But Kingdra has so much going for it. It's the Water Dragon typing, so it's similar typing as, like, a Palkia. Amazing defensive typing. I think it has, like, base 95 stats, like, across the board. It's so good. This is probably one of my favorite dragons on this list. And I actually think you can kind of just, like, splash Kingdras. Like, I've always thought of it like that. Like, even if you don't want to play, like, with Pelipper or Politoed, you can kind of just put a Kingdra in your team if, like, Rain ever becomes really, really popular, and saying, like, hey, I know you want to use Rain, but, like, if you want to use Ludicolo, I'll Airstream it. And if you want to use your Kingdra, I'll Draco Meteor you with my Kingdra. And so it pretty much is like an auto win against Rain, having your own Kingdra in your team. It's so defensive. I historically used Kingdra in the WBE as well. My team was built around Kingdra. I used a lot of physical Kingdra, and that was a lot of fun as well. So I think Kingdra's really, really cool. Maybe I'm putting it a little bit too high, but this is my list. And I think Kingdra's one of those Pokemon that, like, when you are playing against a Kingdra team, if you can wall the Kingdra and wait out their Kingdra, or just beat their Kingdra, their team will fall apart. But if you can't, that Kingdra's going to tear you a new one. And that means it's good enough to be top 5, in my opinion. Top 5, in my opinion. And the next Pokemon, similar to Kingdra, the answer may surprise you. It's going to be Dracovish. So the last not, like, super busted Pokemon. But Dracovish is super busted, popularized by the late great Wolfie VGC. This Pokemon's most common item is going to be the Choice Scarf. And you can see I'm actually rocking a Mystic Water set. This is my personal favorite Dracovish set. But more often than not, people just like to go hit hard, hit fast. They go full speed, full attack on this guy, and they just slam in those vicious Rens. This guy, similar to Dracozolt, the other fossil on the list, gets an ability that boosts its offensive stats Strong Jaw. So it's going to give it a 1 point, I think it's a 1.3 or I think it's 1.3 boost to all biting moves. And it has its own move that deals double damage if you go first. So if you got that Choice Scarf on your base, I think 75 speed stat, you can outspeed most things. And, go first, deal that double damage, and get the Strong Jaw boost. This guy also gets access to Sand Rush, similar to the Dracozolt, so you can play this guy on a T-Tar team as well. Also gets Water Absorb, which is another pretty decent ability. Doesn't really see play. But Dracovish, really, really good Pokemon. You can see that actually the team that I'm using right now in game that we're been laddering with uses Dracovish. I think it's actually a really, really cool way to use this Pokemon, and I like the Mystic Water set because, again, similar to the way I like to play with my Regidrago, it makes it so I don't need to function at the only way that people expect to be played. Like if people are expecting the Choice Scarf set, like this set gets access to Protect, I can Weaver Protects, I can switch in, I can Saga Fang, break strings, break screens, and then I can go for those big vicious runs when I do want to. And the Mystic Water makes it so I still have it makes it actually hit a lot harder than you would believe. It makes so even if I don't outspeed and get the double damage from Vicious Wren, the fact that I have Strong Jaw, I stab the Vicious Wren, and I have the Mystic Water, I can still pick up a ton of KOs with this guy. And Dracovish obviously has a ton of top kill places already. It's one of those Pokemon similar to Duraludon, where it says I'm gonna do this, and there's not a dang thing you can do about it. You can try and intimidate me, but most intimidators Landorus, Arcanine, Incineroar, yeah, they can intimidate you, but they don't want to fight you. They don't really even want to be in that matchup. They don't want anything to do with it. So Dracovish is just a great Pokemon overall. And even if it has to be respected to always be Scarfed, and I think that makes it even better because you don't have to be, and that's the way we're using it here. And that's why I think it's definitely reserving being in top 5. Maybe Kingdra's a little bit better, but I feel it'd be to everyone that started playing in Sword and Shield, I feel it's only fair to you guys that I put Dracovish that high. So up next, then, our top 3. The top 3 best dragons in Sword and Shield. Who's going to be? I'm sure you guys can guess. And I always challenge you guys to let me know your lists in the comments. If anyone wants to type out their full list, I'd be super interested in hearing your list. Or even any disagreements you guys might have with my list as well. But let's see. It's going to be Naganadel. Naganadel's a very, very cool Pokemon. It hasn't had amazing results. It's one of those Pokemon that I think a lot of newer players always gravitate towards because it hits hard, it hits fast, it has Beast Boost, and it's a Poison Dragon, which means it actually has, it takes neutral damage from Fairy, but it has a super effective stab attack similar to Dragalge to actually hit those Fairy types with super effective damage. It gets access to Flamethrower. You can see we're rocking Air Slash to go for Airstreams on this Extra Bolt set that was really, really cool. I think Naganadel's just a great Pokemon, but I feel it leads a little bit more towards hyper offensive teams. And teams that run Naganadels, they're just not the ones that win regionals, right? They usually get kind of far, and then they fight the guy that walls them, and then they kind of just lose. So Naganadel's a really tricky Pokemon to play, but you always gotta watch out for Naganadel because the player that's using Naganadel can literally do anything. Naganadel gets an amazing move pool, such high, it outspeeds all the other dragons for the most part. And it out special attack boosts them. It can get even more attacks. If you want to be a modest Naganadel, you get boost in a special attack. If you want to be timid, you'll get boost in speed. And it's so good. If you get a beast boost off of an Airstream, you can either get a +1 special attack and +1 speed, or you can get a +2 speed off of an Airstream because you're beast boosting into speed stats. So it's a really, really cool Pokemon. And I think that it should have a higher base, it should have, more people should use this thing. I just think it actually brings a lot to the table. Historically, one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of it is because, again, Dynamax makes it a little bit harder to use it than you might like. Even if you're hitting a Tapu Fini with Elite Sludge Bomb, they could just Dynamax and you don't KO it, and then you're just sad. Also, one of the reasons why it's not in the top 2 is because it doesn't have a great matchup against a lot of the mons that set Trick Room. Right, so let's talk about Hydragon. It's a little bit low, but I said the thing that made Hydragon good was that it checked Cresselia, it checked Dusclops, and you could pair it with something that could help check a Porygon too for the most part. Naganadel doesn't really have good matchups. There's any Trick Room setters that are popular, and so it's just a lot harder to use this guy against people that want to play hard TR, and that is one of the ways to definitely deal with this Pokemon is this at that big Trick Room. I would say also Naganadel really is one-dimensional in that it just hits one thing pretty hard, pretty fast. Usually you see the Life Orb or Focus Sash sets, and that just means it loses the redirection, which the 2 Pokemon on this list do not. There's two Pokemon that are left, And the next Pokemon, the second best dragon type in Sword and Shield, I will say it's a strong one. And it's going to be Garchomp. I think Garchomp's going to have to take number 2 for this one. I think Garchomp, historically, is the Pokemon that I've probably top cut the most events with. I've used Garchomp. I used Garchomp in my first regionals team. I used Garchomp in my second regionals team. I used Garchomp in my third regionals team. Like, I've used Garchomp at more regionals events than probably any other Pokemon. I went and looked at it like a while ago. And I've I think myself gotten over like 500 CP with Garchomp. I'm won multiple tournaments. This guy has it all, man. He's the dragon ground. He's the dragon that every other dragon wants to be. Like, he has above base 100 speed. He has above average attack with enough special attack to where, like, if you need to pack that, like, flamethrower to deal with Ferrothorns, you can. He gets access to Swords Dance. He gets access to Substitute. He gets access to Rock Slide. Like, another cool thing about Garchomp is he really doesn't care, like, that you have, like, super effective moves or, like, attacks that are strong. Because Garchomp is strong. Like, he's like, oh, your Cresselia has, like, Ice Beam? Have fun, like, 3-shotting me, because I'm Garchomp. Like, oh, your Tapu Fini has Moonblast? Like, have fun not one-shotting my Garchomp unless you have, like, over 100 points in special attack. Like, that's ridiculous. Even on a sweeper set. Like, historically in Sword and Shield, we've seen a lot of people use Assault Vest, which makes them even bulkier. But in the past, I would say the most common items on Garchomp have been Scarfs, actually. Like, Scarf Rock Slide. This thing was the Landorus that beat the other Landoruses. It would always come down to, like, a Rock Slide flinch battle. But, like, you can go over those Scarf, Earthquakes, Rock Slides, Poison Jab when Boolers are popular. And he just brings so much to the table. And I think Garchomp just, like, oozes style. It also gets, like, access to, like, Rough Skin and Sandvale. Sandvale's not as good. I will say that my first Garchomp that I top cut a regional with did use Sandvale because that was super cool. I wasn't even running T-Tar. T-Tar was just super popular. I waited for them to set Sand, and I'd bring in my Garchomp, and I'd be like, I'm so set. Because no one would fake out the Garchomp back in the day because they all assumed it was Rough Skin. And that still actually happens. Like, people really don't like to fake out if you have Garchomp in the back. Historically, like in previous formats where Mega Kang was available, you would actually like to see, you saw a lot of Rocky Helmet Garchomps. They'd switch in, they'd the Mega evolve their Kangaskhan, and they go for the 2 hits on the fake out, and they'd hit you twice, and they'd take like over half their health in like Rough Skin Rocky Helmet damage. It was a super good check to Kangaskhan back in the day. But Garchomp also had a it had a Mega Evolution, which it had Sand Force, which gave a boost to like rock and ground attacks in the Sandstorm, and it was one of the few Pokemon that got slower when it Mega Evolved, but not too slow, and so they pretty much kind of turned Garchomp into like a Kyurem Black. It got a ton more attack, a little bit more bulk, but it got slower, so it was kind of weird. I always liked it. I would say the best result that Mega Garchomp ever got was Amari Travis in 2014. You can probably actually look it up. There's a video of him playing against, I want to say there's a video of him playing at Seijun Park at the 2014 World Championships where Seijun used like the Pachirisu team, and that's probably the best result Mega Garchomp ever got. But Garchomp's top cut a ton of events. Garchomp is one of the most popular dragons. Everyone loves Garchomp. If you don't like Garchomp, you're a fool, because Garchomp's the best. But yeah, like the Life Orb sets are popular. Lumberry sets are also really, really good. I've also seen, I've also used Habomberry at times just to make it so you guarantee like have good match against other dragons. But like Garchomp can do a lot of cool stuff. And it's only going to get more useful as the meta develops. But that means that the best dragon in Sword and Shield has to be Dragapult. Now, I think a lot of people like sleep on Dragapult, or like you can see the team right now we're using uses Dragapult. Dragapult has like a nuts speed stat. It outspeeds everything. It can be physical, it can be special. It has multiple good abilities. It has Clear Body, Infiltrator, and Curse Body, which is also like super good. And it's a ghost dragon, right? That's why Dragapult's good. It's a ghost dragon. Remember I was talking about Naganadel not really having like a great matchup versus like Trick Room setters? Dragapult one-shots the Trick Room setters, one-shots the Dustclaps, one-shots the Cresselia, like they one-shots the Hatterene, like they gone. Has access to Airstream if you want to give your teammates boosts. Gets access to Dragon Darts, which is a move that only it gets, which is a really, really cool move. So we're going to look at Dragon Darts here. So Dragon Darts is a 50 base power move that hits twice. And these are attacks twice using Dreepy. It fires 2 Dreepies out of it. And if there are 2 targets, it hits each target once. So if there's 1 target, it'll double tap that target. And if there's 2 targets, it's like an AoE attack. And so both attacks are stabbed. Both attacks are base 50, so it goes up to 75 on each one of them. And that's like really good. That's like hitting like 2 targets with this fly on like 1 turn. That's like really, really good. And I think it gets like Dragon Dance. A lot of the times right now, we see it paired with like Colossal. Wolfie VGC recently just won the Players' Cup using a Colossal team, using like a Surf Dragapult, so you could play around redirections and enable your like Colossals or other Pokemon, you know, that have like weakness policies. It also gets like beat up as well, so you can like beat up with like other justified mons. So it works really good as a support mon. It gets dual screens, Will-O-Wisp, so Surf, Ally Switch, but it can also just be like an all-in like physical and or special attacker, specs of its own, like weakness policy, Life Orb, Sash, like literally like every single team could have one of these Pokemon and it can do like anything. And I think that that versatility, like I feel like this is the perfect example of like a power creep. Like its stats are allocated so well to where it has like max speed, max special attack, not really max, but very high special attack and very high attack, well, high enough attack, I guess, to a point where like it's kind of like a Dragon Pheromosa. It's trying its absolute best to be like the sweeper that every other Pokemon in the game is trying its best to be. It has such good coverage too on like everything. I feel that like it's one of the few types, like let's look at ghost types for example. Let's look at like Gengar, right? Gengar can go for like max darkness, or not max darkness, sorry, the max phantasm, right? And max phantasm lowers their defense, and then since Gengar's a special attacker, it can't do anything with it. Dragapult, if you want to be physical with like a Life Orb set, can Dynamax, max Phantasm, lower their defense, and then next turn, since you're using physical attack, since it's boosted up a Phantom Force, it actually gets something out of it, and so that makes it such a good Pokemon. And it's because of like that synergy with that like physical typing on the physical Dragapult sets. I really think that makes it so its max mode is just a lot better than a lot of these other ones. Also has like some pretty unique weaknesses, right? Like being weak to Ghost, being weak to Dark, it's pretty unique, but you can definitely cover up with that if you want to pair it with like an Entity or something like that. Just go for Follow Me. Like it's not uncommon to see like Dragapult redirection, and turn one they just pop the Dragon Dance, Follow Me, and the next turn they Dynamax Dragapult, and they just KO like all 4 of your Pokemon over the next couple turns. So that's gonna be my list. I tried my best to go a little bit more in depth, talk about items, talk about the competitive history of each Pokemon, and if you guys want to see more super long, in-depth videos like this where we rank all the competitive Pokemon, in the games, like let me know in the comments. This took me super long to make, and I don't mind doing one a week, but you gotta let me know what type you want to see me use next. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.